Welcome, everyone, to the Appraisal Institute's podcast series, Face Value. I'm Warren Boizot.
And I'm Tonia Vailas. Today, we'll be diving into AI success stories and sharing personal experiences that have helped in those successes.
As always, thanks for joining us. With us today is Mark Linne, MAI-SRA, AI-GRS, Mark Ratterman, MAI-SRA, and Eric Schneider, MAI-SRA, AI-GRS.
Thank you, Warren, for saying their names with all those extra letters, because I know I would have fumbled on that one.
Tonia, can we change going forward? Can we just say alphabet, like guest alphabet? If they've got them all, let's just call it alphabet.
Sounds great, because I jumble them all the time as well.
Yes.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Could you tell the listeners a little bit about yourselves? Mark Linne, how about we start off with you?
Sure. Thanks, Warren and Tonia. It's great to be here today. I think I realized this morning I've been an appraiser for 40 years, and that's kind of amazing. It has gone quickly. A lot of interesting and entertaining things along the way. But I began in the assessment part of our profession. I worked for the City and County of Denver as an assessor, and I think that really drove my worldview for the longest time because I was used to lots of data, the need to value properties quickly, to understand markets. And so when I entered the fee part of the profession about 32 years ago, I felt like a square peg in a round hole. I wanted to do all these things. I didn't understand why why we only had to use 3 comps, why we couldn't use 1,000. And so, but I learned there was an advantage to having that background in analysis and that kind of focus. And that led me really to work on the first of my 3 books for the Appraisal Institute, kind of talking about those kinds of analytic techniques. For a number of years, then I also, have developed a lot of seminars, a lot of presentations for the Appraisal Institute. But I've really been involved with the Institute for the majority of my professional career. And I think I was looking up the other day, I think I've been a member of the Institute for 35 years. So during that time, I've been involved with the local chapter, but I've also been involved with the Strategic Planning Committee, the Publications Committee when we had that. I've served on the board of the Appraisal Journal, and I'm currently on the Publications panel. But right now I'm on the Education Committee, this is a critical time for us to develop new education and really determine how we deploy education to our members. So it's been a very exciting time for me. In terms of my private practice, I do complex assignments. I do a lot of litigation. Probably half my practice is litigation, generally defending the profession against the AVMs and BPOs and other product types. Also on issues of bias. I've been involved with a lot of that lately in litigation. And so, it's been a very fruitful career, and my connection with the Appraisal Institute has been a significant and integral part of that.
Thank you, Mark. And you mentioned the local Colorado chapter. We are both a member, and everyone should know that he puts out an awesome newsletter. He is our newsletter guy, and he's the best at it. So thanks for being here, Mark. Eric, I haven't seen you in a few years. How are you, man? Let's get your bio and introduce yourself to everyone.
No, thank you. It's good to see you, and I'm happy to be here. I work at a boutique appraisal shop in San Diego, California. Our firm primarily focuses on litigation, appraisal work, forensic review across the United States. So we get to work on some pretty interesting assignments. I've been doing this for about 15 years, which based on our profession standards makes me an infant. But it's been a very great journey. I've had some wonderful mentors. And ever since I started in real estate appraisal, I was told to get involved with the Appraisal Institute. So started taking classes at University of San Diego. I know a lot of our brethren did the same. It's a wonderful campus and a great place to learn how to do what we do. I started getting involved with the chapter, started with committees, eventually became chapter president, and then moved on to the national involvement. Finished chairing the designation committee. I chaired the Leadership Development and Advisory Council. I do a little bit of teaching, but overall, my experience with the Appraisal Institute has been stellar, and I'm just happy to be involved.
Wonderful to hear, Eric.
Yeah.
And of course, they make this the most complicated podcast with 2 Marks. So, Mark Ratterman, how about you?
Okay. Well, I have been in the real estate business for 45 years. I've been an appraiser for 40.
It became a competition, huh?
Yeah, well, maybe so. I don't know if I like the competition, but 44 years of it has been in appraisal. I started out selling houses and hated it. And so fortunately, my next door neighbor was an appraiser, and so I was able to kind of move over into that. I've been an Appraisal Institute and predecessor member for 42 years. And so I've been around for a long time in that regard. My work has been a variety of things. I have been very focused on education for a long time. And I've been teaching classes since I think like 84 or something to that effect. And I have written quite a few seminars, and for the Institute, I've written some stuff for the foundation. I've written stuff for other entities as well. I am practicing. I'm rather old, but I am still practicing. I have a new trainee as of 6 months ago, and I think she's probably my 12th or 13th trainee. But I'm sole practitioner to a large extent, and I'm in a partnership with some other people, but we all are kind of work independently. I'm also one of 4 members of our licensing board in our state, so I'm involved in writing rules and laws within our state for appraisers, and have been for almost 10 years. I also have been on the Journal Review Board. I have been on the National Education Committee. I've not gone too much farther than that as far as that goes. I have taught classes in pretty much 30 different states in China, Korea, Japan, Eastern Europe, always for the Institute, by the way, because they paid the way. And so done that as well. I am probably the most of my work has been writing and books of one sort or another. And if you count second and third editions, I'm now working on number 16. And so you guys will appreciate this. I am working on revising Nelson Bowe's cost approach book right now.
Oh, great.
And so Nelson was a very good friend of mine, and we used to teach all the time. And so God rest his soul. So I'm working on that right now. I'm also working with Ray Martinez on the PARIA program. And so for those of you who don't know that is the Practical Applications of Real Estate Appraisal Experience process that the foundation has been promoting and approved to replace some of the experience requirements. So working on some case studies of that. I did some of that again this morning. So, but that's going on as well. So that's what I do. I'm still practicing. So even though I'm pretty old.
You don't look that old.
Yeah, well.
Thanks, Mark. And you have been kind enough in the past to be on a couple of wrapped phone calls and been very helpful. So we appreciate that. I didn't know your involvement with the development of PARIA, so that's good to know. I can't wait for it to roll out.
It was, they actually needed properties to have appraisals done on. So I'm in Indianapolis. And so the PARIA program will have at least 3, probably 4 case studies here in Indianapolis, because it's like everything else. You write about what you know. And so this morning I spent an hour with the Learning Mate people who are in India and don't know much about United States real estate, and we were talking about my personal residence because that was the easiest thing to do an appraisal on. So I already had the floor plans and stuff like that. So
now we know when the PARIA program comes out the case study of 123 Main Street Anywhere USA is somewhere in Indianapolis, right?
Well, they're all over the place because I worked
Yeah.
on some in Florida and I worked on some in
Okay.
Georgia, and so they're pretty diverse.
Nice. Excellent. Well, thank you for your introductions, everyone. Like Tonia mentioned earlier, we're focusing on ways in which you've achieved success within the Appraisal Institute, bringing awareness to others on how they can get involved and what those processes look like today.
Thank you, everyone, for your bios. And let's get started with talking about how we submit ideas for AI education and book topics. Mark R., why don't we get started with you, since you said you have the most experience. You sound like you have the most experience in this avenue of book writing and ideas.
Yes, I probably do. I don't know that that's a really great thing, but I probably do. And my initial thought on this, because I wrote down some notes on this, is that when you're thinking about writing something, whether it be a course or seminar or a book, whatever it is, you need to find a void. You need to find something, a vacuum, that there's something missing. And my first book that I ever wrote wasn't very big. It was 150 pages or so, 200 pages. I found that when I was doing houses, doing residential appraisals, that there was almost nothing written about how to correctly extract and apply adjustments to the sales comparison analysis. It was a void, and no, I didn't find anything. And so I said to somebody, I forget, I think it was probably Tep Shea Joyce, who was the director of publications, and I had known her for something else. And I said, what about a book on that? And she said, write it. And so it was more or less, and I will tell you, once I wrote the first one, the second one came much easier. And after you write the second or third one, then they're calling you, asking you, well, we have this idea, we need somebody to write it. And so I don't want you to think I'm that creative, because I'm not. It's a matter of, usually somebody said there's a void here. We need to fill this in. And so but it's like anything else. You should write about what you know. And don't try to write about, for example, I'm involved a little bit in low-income housing tax credits. I know nothing about them. And so when they said to me, what do you know about this? I said, nothing. And they said, yeah, but we need you to read the seminar for teachability, whether we can teach it. And I said, fine, but don't ask me for content, because I don't know content, because I don't understand it. And I will be the first person sitting in the front row saying, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So they've got somebody that knows the content, and I'm going to help a little bit on teachability. And then, of course, they have editors, and I can't emphasize this enough. The Institute has great editors to fix my grammar, my spelling, my pronunciation, you name it. They fix everything. So you don't have to be a good English major here, because I'm clearly not. And so they fix everything. So if you can give them content, and you can give that to them, and I'm underlining this also, on time. If there's people at the Institute that I work with all the time will tell you, well, Ratterman, not the best writer. We have to edit his work a lot, but he never misses a deadline. Yep. And that's what I'm known for, is never missing a deadline. And so, and that's where they fall down. So many authors fall down, is that they say they'll do it and then don't. And so, so if there's a claim to fame that I have, it's not my writing skills. It's that I don't miss the deadline. And I don't miss the deadlines because I dedicate Saturdays to this. Oh, yes, wow. Every Saturday, probably half of the year, my Saturdays are dedicated to writing. And so tomorrow, Saturday, I will be working on the cost of book. And so, and the same way with the material in that regard. So, other than that, I mean, it's like what you learned in high school. You write an outline of what you're going to say, and then you submit that to the Institute, and then they run it up the flagpole. So if it goes to education committee looks at it and says yes or no, or we'd like to see this or like to see that. If it's publications, then it goes to the publications. They decide, no, we think this won't work, or it's not saleable, or we don't need it. But most of the time, it's a matter of add this or add that. And so you just have to outline what you're thinking and pitch the proposal to the institute. And so that's been kind of the way it works for me.
Excellent. So Mark L., how about you? Is there a similar process with AI education, ideas and topics that you want to talk about?
There are. It's interesting. I would say I differ from Mark R. in that I do miss deadlines frequently, it appears. I'd echo what Mark said about the support mechanism that the Appraisal Institute has. When I was writing books, I think I'm an okay writer, but after Tapp and Mike McKinley, the other professionals, they would take so prose, and I would look at it later and I was just astonished at how good I sounded. Right. I mean, that's kind of their gift. And so it's not, I think the important message on whether it's a class or whether it's a book is that there are other people there to help you in doing this, and you're not alone. So what they're looking for are ideas, and someone capable of taking those ideas and making them accessible to other members of the profession. So with education, it's very interesting. There's more opportunity, I think, because if you look at qualifying education, you look at professional education for designation, those are all fairly well established. It's the new topic areas like seminar development, where we have, topical areas that are of interest to our members. There is always an opportunity to present those, and they can, I think, begin at a chapter level. Perhaps you have an idea that's interesting, and that idea then can morph into perhaps an hour presentation. If it's something that's very good, it can kind of go up the ladder. And if it has broader applications to other chapters, then, that's a wonderful way to develop a course, kind of a homegrown course. For me, I was able to develop a course a few years ago on artificial intelligence, blockchain, and AVMs. And, it's funny how that course really developed. It was because Bill Garber reached out to me and he left me a voicemail actually. And he said, Mark, I'd like you to talk about the other AI. And when he said that, I listened to that voicemail and I thought, the other AI? I mean, because AI in my mind is always the Appraisal Institute. Yeah. So I thought, the dark side of the Appraisal Institute? What are you talking about? and then I realized it all came to me. And so I did a chapter, and I knew a fair amount about artificial intelligence and about blockchain. But I think the thing about being an instructor or developing a course is you learn even more about the subject matter, the topic area. So I wrote a 1-hour seminar for the DC chapter. And that's what Bill wanted me to do. And I will tell you, I learned so much. I tried to make it interesting. I tried to make it compelling. And it's the first time, I've always had a lot of people come up after seminars saying, oh, that was really good. But I felt like a rock star after this one because the topic, the information was so topical and so interesting and so frightening at the same time. And people were buying me drinks afterwards. And I thought, okay, this is a really good topic area. So I expanded it to a 2-hour seminar for my chapter, the Colorado chapter. It was very well received. I increased it to 4 hours and started giving it to chapters who would reach out. And then I worked with National to make it a 4-hour national course, and that debuted in 2019. And the thing, what changed between the course I developed and the national course is suddenly I had the whole infrastructure of AI to help me. And I mean, editors and graphics design and legal and, a USPAP overview and all of this great support mechanism. And I think the course that was developed became so much better than what I'd originally built. And now that's been popular enough that we're expanding it to a 7-hour seminar that'll debut in the fall. And it's the same process. Everyone is working with me. We're doing that right now. And it's just very, a very holistic and engaging process, I think, that I would encourage if anyone has an idea. And that's, to answer your question, Tonia, it's, you come up with the idea, you come up with the concept, and even if you're not the world's greatest expert on it, by the time you're done with the seminar or whatever the educational offering is, you will be an expert in it. And so it actually helps you to become better at whatever it is you're talking about. So it's good for students, it's good for you, it's good for the Institute and for the profession.
Listening to you speak, you can hear the passion coming out in your voice and desire to educate, which is wonderful. Warren, what about a little competition here? Who do you think?
Love it.
Who do you think
Love
wrote
it.
the most books?
Between our guests?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see
I heard
here.
16th edition, so I'll use whatever editions those are as one book and just edits.
Now, I'm going to go with the fact that you're asking this question. You think you're going to trip me up because Mark R has already said that 16. Mark is counting his fingers. He's taking his shoes off to count his toes. I'm going to go with Mark L because I think you're trying to trip me up.
I don't know. I don't know the answer. Can I vote on Mark R?
You asked as if you knew the answer, but
No.
yes, let's ask our guest.
I will go with Mark R. Sorry, Eric. Your 15 years toddlers doesn't put you up there.
Unless he wrote 2 books a year. Could be.
As I said before, I've written 16 books, but that
16.
includes second and third editions.
Oh,
Because
okay.
one of the books that I wrote and is the student handbook for the 13th, 14th, and 15th editions. See, and this is a 400-page book.
Did you independently write it though?
Yeah, repeatedly. Well,
Wow.
I want to say I wrote the first one.
Okay. Okay. Let's count that as one.
Entirely by myself.
Let's change the rules. If Mark's L's more, we'll change the rules. Let's see how this turns out.
But I want to make a point that actually Mike McKinley, I want to give him big credit for writing the second and third editions because they do that. I wrote every word of the first book, and it's, like I said, 300-400 pages because it essentially made the textbook into something the colleges and universities can use. And the reason I wrote it is because I was running a school of my own at the time, and I called and talked to Tep Shea Joyce and said, can I do this and not violate copyright rules? She says, well, if you buy our textbooks, we don't mind you writing something. Just keep buying our textbooks. I said, okay. Well, then 6 months later, she called me and said, maybe we want to publish this. And so that's, like I said, that's like a second and third edition. The book I wrote on sales comparison adjustments, that had 3 editions. And so the shelf life, after they're 5, 6, 8 years old, they want to rejuvenate them. They want to redo them. So, but independently, the book's probably of single titles, it's probably 11 or 12.
Wow.
So with different titles.
Wow.
Come on, Mark.
5. Okay.
I'm sorry. but I'm writing a 6th.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Eric,
We're going to
how
have
about
you guys on this time again next year. Mark Linne, please have, let's see,
Completed?
8 completed by then.
Well,
along with the Colorado chapter newsletter, too.
There you go. Well, here's an interesting thing, though. So this is very topical. So it's about longevity and how many editions, Mark brought up the multiple editions. So I was looking at a bank statement last night and, it's kind of a segue here, but I noticed this payment from the Appraisal Institute for $9.25, and I could not figure out what that was. And it was my wife who finally said, oh, it must be a royalty payment. So it was a royalty payment from the book I published in 2000. So
nice.
23 years ago, apparently it is still selling, which is a positive. But, it was just, I thought of that last night. I thought, it's a great little anecdote that also shows you don't do this for money necessarily. You do this because it's the right thing to do and because you have something to offer to the profession. And I think that, that kind of outweighs any financial, gain that you might otherwise get.
I want to follow up on that just for a second. About 10 years ago, I hit Tep Shea Joyce up and said, do you want something that's going to make the Institute some money? She goes, yes. And I said, well, do you want to publish a Q&A book, a questions and answers book to help you get through the exam? Because exam anxiety is what everybody has. And I'd already written when, I don't know, Mark, if you remember, Florida came in with their own specifications for test questions.
Yeah.
And I had to rewrite all the course test questions. I spent a whole summer writing test questions for Florida. And they put up some special specifications for that. And so I had a pretty good shelf of inventory of questions. And so I rewrote that book. And to this day, it's still, I get the most royalties out of the Q&A book than I do out of everything else combined. And so test anxiety is a seller.
There you go.
Eric, how about you? Have you written any books for AI?
I've not written any books. I've written articles and I've done a lot of speaking across the country. But I will say, as a practitioner, those books are open and frequently used. Appraisal Institute's body of knowledge is something that I look to in my day-to-day practice, and I'm just so thankful for guys like Mark that continue to be involved and update our courses and update our materials, because, as everyone knows, per our standards, we've got to be privy of the latest and greatest recognized methods and techniques, and that's everything that these guys are putting out. So my hat's off to you both.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both. And everyone else who writes material for AI.
Great.
Tonia, a couple general questions. One here for each, Mark, if I could. Mark L., not to pry into your personal finances, but for those that are interested in making money, for example, that $9.35 royalty from your book from 2000, was that a whole year's worth of sales, or was that one book?
I believe that was one book.
Okay. See, all of you out there, all of you listeners that are interested in making a dime or two, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And then Mark R., a general publishing question. When a new edition of something is done, is there like a term is there like a rule as to how much content needs to technically be changed to then become a new edition? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Usually with the thing that'll change, like the student handbook had to change because the textbook changed. So the 13th edition of the textbook comes out. Well, the 14th edition comes out, you have to change the book. And that's what I was saying. Mike McKinley did an awful lot of that cross-referencing to say, for those people who don't know it, Mike McKinley is not an appraiser, and he's the smartest appraiser I know. He writes the textbooks for us. And I was on the body of knowledge committee for 3 years, and he was integral in that. We worked on the dictionary, we worked on the textbook, and he is essentially the guy that puts it all together. Yep. And so, but as the other second edition, third editions would come out, but usually it's a matter of, other than that student handbook, it's a matter of, is there a need to change it? So if you write something that's a reference to USPAP, and they change the USPAP book, well, now that we don't know when they're going to change it, but it used to be every 2 years they would change the book. You'd have to change your book. And so it depends on what it's tied to. And so, it's not, there's no need to change it all the time. So, just when things change.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I, just didn't know if people were, changing the font size and then calling it a new book or something just to make the money.
Not at the Institute, they don't. And no, not at all. And if there's no need for it, it just doesn't happen. And so, but the industry's changing, and the other AI that you were talking about, Mark, is scary, to be honest with you. And I think that's going to necessitate a whole lot of changes. And for us, that the appraisal, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are coming out with new appraisal forms, and that's going to require some writing as far as that goes, and it's going to change a lot of stuff that we have published. So that the change of the forms will change a lot of course material as well as publications.
Right.
And I'm still curious on the $9 royalties. What book was that for?
that was a guide to appraisal valuation modeling. And here's the interesting thing. It's, I said it's not about the royalties necessarily. It's about what you're doing for the profession. But, if you write a book, you also have other bennies. And so I had a story. I was presented to the Northern California chapter a number of years ago. And one of the co-authors of A Guide to Appraisal Valuation Modeling is George Dell. And George and I we'd both made a different presentation. We were walking out and George said, "Mark, thank you so much for letting me participate in that book," because he said, it led to my getting this big litigation assignment and portfolio review assignment. He said, and I made, mid six figures. It was amazing. And I went, "Oh, that's wonderful." But then I went back to my room, and it's funny how this parallelism here. My wife gave me a call, and I said, "Did we get anything in the mail today?" She said, "Yeah, you got this check from the Appraisal Institute for $56.10. So I decided that day I was going to do more litigation work because clearly, it wasn't from the royalties, but it shows that doing books, doing coursework, it makes you a better appraiser. And that leads to you then being, I think, a better litigator, a better, provider of valuation services, no matter what you're doing or what part of the profession you're in.
I have a George Dell story too. I had to write a statistics chapter in the student handbook, and I'm not statistics. Mark Linne, you are the statistics guy, and George is too.
Yeah.
And so I said to the publisher, I said, "I can't write this. I just don't know it well enough to write something that anybody should read." And she goes, "Well, do we have anybody that can help us?" And I said, "Well, my sister's a PhD in psychology, and they are very, very into statistics. And her husband works in statistics. He analyzes medical claims for, at the time, Humana. I mean, that's all he does." So my sister wrote the chapter. We put a footnote in it that she wrote all this, etc. George sent me an email saying, "You did a great job on that chapter. You really showed us the statistics," but I didn't write it. So my sister did, which brings me to my point. You don't have to do this alone.
Right.
I've got an appraiser in my office right now. We're writing an article that I'm going to send to the journal people and jointly as with both of us. And you don't have to do this by yourself. Got an idea? Run it up the flight. Get a partner. Get somebody else to help you write it. And then all of a sudden the calendar starts working its way through, and you'll get it done and send it in. So joint publications, joint journal articles, those kinds of things can easily be done, and each of you can motivate the other.
Yeah.
Did you give your sister credit?
Yeah, we did, and she's actually helped me a couple of times on other stuff. I mean, she's really into statistics, and she's got a person backing her up too, because her husband does nothing but statistics. And so when I'm sitting there talking about kurtosis, is that right, Mark?
Yeah. Kurtosis.
I said, "What the hell is that?" And so she explained it to me, Lucy. And so, but yeah, you don't have to do this alone. And that wasn't even part of the institute. It was just my sister being pretty smart about this stuff. So
Very cool.
Tonia, with one book under your belt, you would be the face value podcast host with the most books. You got one?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I have my demo. Does that count as a book?
Just put a binder on it.
It's
call it
bound.
one. Okay.
And not capstone, none of this, alternatives. I went straight up old demo route.
Good.
And it is a work of art.
Exactly. That's how I feel.
Well, like Eric, I've gotten a couple articles, but I can tell you that you learn, maybe not necessarily grammar or spelling, but when you're told to come back with 2,000 words and then you can't get it from 8,000 down to 2, and you turn it in and then you come back and you're like, wow, they said what I just said, my long-winded way about me. I just got 2,000 words of what I just tried to say in 8,000. So you learn all the fluff that you can cut out, or at least have someone else do it. To your point, Mark Linne, about having people there that'll help you out.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
great. Well, switching gears a bit, I wanted to talk about networking and leadership. And Eric, you're on, my man. It's time for you to shine. Can you talk about your success with AI and how LDAC is one of the ways that you're involved?
Certainly, I would love to. LDAC, Leadership Development and Advisory Council, is, in my humble opinion, one of the best events that the Appraisal Institute puts on. It's a leadership event held in Washington, D.C., and really has three aspects to it. One is it's a think tank. You have real estate appraisers from all over the country discussing ideas, discussing issues that are not only impacting the organization, but our profession as well. Where we're going, what things can we do to improve in our industry, in AI. That's one aspect of it. It's also a lobbying event. Like I said, we're in Washington, D.C. There's an afternoon where appraisers are meeting with their congresspeople. And in a state like California, you may talk to the intern's intern, but in other states, you are meeting with senators and you're meeting with congressmen and women. And so that's interesting because you get to tell them, hey, these are the issues that are impacting our profession. You know, this bill is important because of X, Y, and Z. And so that's another critical aspect of what we do in Washington, D.C. and on the Hill. The last thing, which is really important to me, is the networking opportunity that you have. You are meeting people from Hawaii to Maine that are passionate about the Appraisal Institute. They're passionate about what they do for a living. And it's a breath of fresh air to be able to collaborate on ideas, talk about assignments, and build friendships. I have friends for life because of this event. And if I have an assignment in Florida, I know the exact person to call. Yep. Or if someone has a theory issue that they want to run by, I'm happy to pick up the phone and chat. So it's a really great opportunity to meet others, discuss issues, make a difference in our profession, and take part in the governmental process of representing yourself in Washington, D.C.
Excellent. I'm a LDAC alum. I think Warren is as well. How about Mark and Mark? Did you guys go to LDAC or YAC, as it was called back in the day?
I don't think in 1982 they had LDAC when I joined.
I think they had YAC.
Is that what it was?
What's YAC? What does that stand for?
The Young Advisory Council. At
one point,
I think maybe they did have it then. Yeah. Okay. I didn't do that. No.
I just like saying yak.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I have not attended LDAC or YAC. You know, and I think in retrospect, I would have. I think, but maybe in the early days, I wasn't quite as in tune with, you know, the opportunities that LDAC really offered. And in retrospect, though, I've talked to so many people who have said, you know, exactly what Eric said, that was a fundamentally, you know, a change event in their lives that connected them with a lot of other very bright and engaging people who were thought leaders, as Eric said. And I think, you know, in retrospect, I would do it. And I would encourage those who haven't done it to go down that path. Because especially if you're interested in service to the profession, you know, this is a way to really get involved.
Mark, there's still time if you want to join.
I agree.
Yeah.
You don't do enough for the Institute, from what I hear. No, I'm just kidding.
You're never too young for LDAC.
Yeah. No, it's never too old for LDAC.
Yeah.
And I think I am.
You're never too young for LDAC. I bet you they've had older participants than you, Mark.
Okay.
I think they have.
Mark touched on a good point, which I think is important, and that's the leadership aspect of it. One of the networking components includes talking with executive leadership. You know, you have everyone coming down to this event, from the immediate past president all the way to the vice president. I always get this slate mixed up. I totally messed it up at this year's LDAC too. So Sandy, I'm very sorry about that. But you get to talk to executive leadership. The incoming president needs to fill the slate of national committees, and what a great opportunity to go to that event and get exposed to national leadership and potentially get on a committee that changes the way we do things in our profession. There's a body of knowledge. And like I said, I was chairing the designation committee, protecting our brand, so to speak. And the other thing about the leadership role aspect of it is you're sharing ideas about what's working and what's not in your chapter. And so it's so refreshing and energizing to hear about what's going on in Colorado or Indianapolis and say, hey, that's a really cool event, or that market trend seminar idea. I'd love to bring that back to Southern California. Share your notes with me and I'll do the same. So just not only at that local level, but at a national level, you get that experience, being involved and seeing what leadership looks like.
Couldn't agree more, Eric. The thing I wanted to add, there might be people out there driving around listening to this podcast that are a member of the Appraisal Institute thinking, well, I'd love to get involved in that. And that sounds pretty cool. My own story is that I was at a chapter meeting early on and being involved at the Colorado chapter, and they talked about LDAC. And I thought to myself, I don't know what that is, but I'm going to make a note to ask. So after the meeting, it was very early on, I went up to our executive director at the time, Sherry Engelberg, and said, hey, what's this LDAC thing? And she said, oh, well, it's something that everyone does that happens in May, that you go to Washington, D.C. I'd be interested in doing something like that. How do I go about doing it? And she said, exactly what you just did. Tell me that you're interested. And I went the next year. So some chapters have it where they like to have their walking of the chairs, that's who goes. But believe me, if you just show interest at your chapter level that you'd be interested in going, believe it or not, you probably will.
I went to LDAC way before I was on the executive committee at my chapter. So yeah, I agree, Warren. I showed interest. I'm like, I want to go lobby. It was just something I didn't know about the other experience. I didn't know about becoming a discussion leader or chair or vice chair. I didn't know. I just wanted to go lobby. I was like, oh, I can talk to, senators and council members. This will be fun. That's what I thought when I went to LDAC. So yeah, I was a younger appraiser, but now it's a change. The culture has changed because it's not just the young appraisers, it's everyone who wants to go give back and meet people. The networking is extreme. Like, I've never been to an event where I networked with people all over the country and the world. There was people from Puerto Rico, Mexico when I went, and like Eric said, these are connections you keep and you continue with them, but you also learn about different areas. You learn about different property types. You learn that things are done differently in different parts of the world. And not everyone is wrong. Like, you're not wrong because you do something differently. So you learn how to analyze, cash flows or property. It's just so much you can learn from other people, and it's an excellent networking experience.
I got to meet someone who actually used price per cow as a metric. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yes, someone uses price per cow.
Shout out to Kelly Yates in Czech, Virginia.
Price per cow. Wow.
That's cool.
Eric, funny you mentioned the, you are in California and, you show up and sometimes you're meeting with like one of the senator's attorneys or lead staff or something like that. I remember we walked in, three of us from our Colorado chapter, and, gave our spiel to this high staff member. And he kind of just looked at me and had written something on a piece of paper, and he kind of slid it and said, here's where I live back in Colorado. What do you think my home value is doing?
He was not listening to you, was he?
Said, well, if you kind of pay attention to me here, what I'm kind of coming to you with, I may be able to help you out with that. But I just thought it was funny that all that came to. So how are things doing back in my neighborhood?
Yeah. Tell me what my property is worth. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, as you guys probably know, you don't know me by Eric Schneider. My name in the Appraisal Institute is Schmitty. And I got this name from my first year at LDAC. The vice chair of the event, who was my coworker at the time, was trying to relay a story that I had shared with him. And he said, I want to tell you this great anecdote that my good friend, coworker, colleague, Eric Schmidt told me. And that was almost 10 years ago now. And everyone in the organization from top to bottom now refers to me as Schmitty. And so if you are a real estate appraiser in AI and you come across me and you say Schmitty, then I know the secret code is there. And we're good.
Yes.
But I just thought
That's how it
something's jumped up.
started.
Yeah. No, it's great. And I love Trevor Hubbard to death because of that.
So as we wrap this up, can each of you give one piece of advice that you would give someone just getting started in our industry?
Just hired another trainee, so I do that. I hire one, and then when they progress to work on their own, trainees are always, to me, temporary employees. They're never long-term employees. I don't hire them with long-term employment as the goal. It's always work for me for 3 or 4 years, 2 years, and then move on. And so I just started with a new person, and she is working out pretty nicely. And I would tell new appraisers the same thing: is do get involved. And you never learn so much as when you associate with smart people. And so, and the Institute, if you've never thought about this, the Institute is full of type A personalities. We are all type A. And so consequently, my involvement, I was fortunate because my mentor when I first started was an MAI, and he had actually been national president of the Society of Real Estate Appraisers. And it was almost mandatory that we join the Institute at the time. And so, and I will tell you that alone, my involvement in the Institute has actually really essentially made me where I am today. And I can't imagine how I would be where I am without that first push that I got from my mentor was, you have to join, you have to belong, and I expect you to. And so it's not free to join, but it actually has worked out, whether you're a candidate initially or you get your designation done. Well, I did fairly quickly. It has been worth it. And I will say to you, back when I started, there was no licensing. No certification, no appraisal certification program. The only indication you had that you were qualified was the MAI, SRA, SRPA, et cetera, and so it meant more back then, but it still means a lot today. And so I know I'm sounding like a cheerleader for the Institute, and I am, but I would say to you, just like other people, that's the first thing I would say is you have to get involved. And so my new associate is already joined. She's less than a year into the business, about a year in, and she's already joined. She's gone through something. She's got some, by the way, she's also got her courses paid for by diversity. Help me here.
Appraisal Diversity Committee, right?
Yeah, something to that effect.
ADI.
My former partner is Stephen Wagner, and he's actually an employee of the Institute now, and so he knows all this stuff, and I don't. And so he says, "Oh yeah, I can help you with this," and again, so she's starting out, and with big help from the Institute, that benefit that she's got from that minority initiative. And so that's my best piece of advice is go down the path, but also join the Institute, and if you can, and you will find it rewarding.
Thank you for that. And Mark L., now that we know how to join the Institute and benefits of just becoming a member, how about becoming a leader? Can you talk us through that? What advice would you give someone who wants to be a leader?
I would start even before that and say you have to start by getting involved, right? You have to join, but membership without participation isn't very meaningful. You have to, because we are type A personalities, but if you just stay in your garage and you never go out, if you're working in your basement and you never go out, you miss perhaps the greatest opportunity you have, which is the to be able to work with your peers and potential mentors and to be a mentor. And I think leadership then comes from beginning that process of, if you're mentored to, then you become a mentor down the road. And then you find that you can participate in many different ways. I've always tried to find things. There are so many different aspects to the Appraisal Institute that you can participate in, depending on what your skill set is, depending on what your interest is. And I think as you do that, as you become involved in these numerous opportunities for participation, once you achieve that participation, then I think you start to cultivate different ideas, you start to mature those ideas, and then you move into leadership. And I think the Institute is built in a manner that encourages leadership and it helps in that development, whether it's through LDAC, whether it's through, other ways of just committee participation and moving up through the ranks of different committees. All of those things help to build you as an individual, and I think ultimately make you a leader. Because if you're a member of the Institute, I would argue you are a leader already in the appraisal profession because you're a professional. And I think that would be the advice I would give. Get involved, become a member, get involved, and through that involvement, it will help to build you to be a better person.
So now, Eric, again, being the toddler of this group, you spoke a little bit about attending LDAC, becoming discussion leader, vice chair, chair. Where do you want to go? From all that experience, what do you want to do in leadership?
That's a great question. I think at this point, even though I'm still at toddler age, it's about giving back and helping people get involved, whether that's at the college level. And I will do a quick plug. As part of the designation committee, we helped, or the admissions committee, which is a part of it. College students can now become a member for free. And so being exposed to this profession, if you want to get involved, there's an opportunity to do that. And there are so many scholarships available at the local and national level that the education component is one big hurdle to becoming a real estate appraiser. And these opportunities are available to help mitigate that. But just helping people move up, whether that's just becoming an appraiser, which is a difficult thing to do, or getting experience in a particular field of our business, that's just something I want to continue to do, because I'm sure, like everyone on this call, we didn't get here on our own. We had someone pulling us up. And so just to be a part of that group now and help pull others up, and help keep our profession strong is something that's part of the plan. And if people want me to stick around and join another committee, happy to do that too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
I don't think we can beat any of those three advice points. So thank you all.
Certainly.
And we're going to have that opportunity coming soon with the AI PRIA program. At the chapter level, we're all going to know about these new crop of potential appraisers coming through that we can help guide through the process, and hopefully SRAs and MAIs down the road one day.
AI-GRS and AI-RRS.
Alphabet.
All the soup.
Tonia, can I take an opportunity to bring a little levity to our podcast?
Of course.
Mark Linne, I did not have the organic opportunity to bring up this story. You don't realize probably 4 years ago today, literally today, 2019, July 21st, we were in Denver. We dined together at a regional event before the national conference in Denver. And you said you were leaving. You weren't going to be able to stay at the national conference for the whole entire time because you were leaving to go to Los Angeles the next day for a special reason. Why don't you tell us what that special reason was, because it's such a great story.
That's funny. Thank you, Warren. So there are two kinds of people in the world, I think. There are those who watch Wheel of Fortune, and there are those who watch Jeopardy. And I think you have a predilection towards one of them. I come from a mixed family where my wife likes Wheel of Fortune. I like Jeopardy. And I mean, she would watch it every night religiously. That was her thing. And so I remember seeing that they had tickets available. So I put together this complicated, and it was very complicated.
Wait, which show?
Oh, Wheel of Fortune. Sorry, Wheel of Fortune. And
Actually,
so
Price is Right,
right, yeah. Well, I didn't tell my wife anything about it. I just wanted to surprise her, and then I wanted to do something just kind of unique, and so I got her tickets to a taping of 5 shows of. Did I just say The Price is Right? Of Wheel of Fortune. And then afterwards, it took her to. We had a private tour of Sony Studios, and then we went to Catalina Island. So it was just a nice little. I wanted to do something different and interesting, and I thought it was a lot of fun. And I didn't tell her about it. I just told her I was taking her somewhere, and literally I said, pack, we're going to a reasonably warm climate. And I just, until she still didn't even know, she knew we were going to Los Angeles because obviously she had to figure that out to get on the plane. But I didn't tell her what we were actually doing until we drove up to the studio. So it was kind of
love it.
Yeah, it was cool.
I love it, Mark.
It's cool.
Speaking of Price is Right, I had a friend who actually went on that show.
Yeah?
They won a car.
What?
Nice.
That's
Guess
great.
how much they had to pay in taxes when they came home?
Oh, no.
It was horrible.
Quick Wheel of Fortune story for you. I had a little scam I was running in high school that's interesting. I lived directly across the street from my high school, my junior and senior years, and to the point where I could listen to the 5-minute tardy bell and still be in my seat for class with 3 minutes to spare. I mean, I lived across the street. So often my house would be the place where people would hang at lunch, but still got 20 minutes before class starts. Let's go over to Warren's house and hang out. What I found out was that when Wheel of Fortune airs at like 5 o'clock prime time at night, the next day at like 11 or noon, whatever it was during lunchtime, they aired the same episode from the night before. So my friends didn't know this till a few years ago, but I made them a lot of money doing this. That I would watch the one the night before, and then they thought I was some kind of Wheel of Fortune savant because I had already watched it from the night before. But hey, they need to pay attention. But I would sit there, sometimes I'd let them win a little bit, but then I'd be like, how do you always get this? And I said, I'm just good at this. I don't know what to tell you. So that's my Wheel of Fortunes. And also, I know they're looking for a host. I'm shooting my shot here. I want Pat Sajak's job.
No, he's resigning?
I think
He's
so.
retiring.
Oh,
Yeah.
retiring.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Warren, you got my vote.
Good luck, Warren.
Yeah. Go for it. Go for
For
it.
what it's worth.
Well, before we get into any more sitcom, 101 over here, because I will fail. Warren is the expert in entertainment. But thank you, Mark, and Eric, for joining us today. This was an excellent conversation. And thank you to our listeners. See, you don't just talk about appraisal work here. We talk about everything. So thank you, and hope to see you all next month.